We have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're returning to the airport.
American 11, Boston Center, are you trying to reach me?
Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. If you try to do anything, you'll endanger yourself and the aircraft.
A Boston air traffic controller, just 10 minutes ago, lost all contact with Flight 11. Now he's received 2 strange transmissions, and it's becoming clear. The plane's been hijacked. The transponder, the device that tells controllers where the plane is, was switched off almost immediately, which means right now, no one knows where it is.
The controller quickly relays the news of the hijacking to other controllers, then up the chain to his supervisors, and finally, to the military. It takes half an hour before anyone manages to make out the thick Arabic accent of the hijacker, and hears a chilling phrase: "We have planes."
Not just one plane, multiple. At that moment, hundreds of other aircrafts are flying across the US sky, and the situation is spiraling fast.
Hi, Boston Center, TMU. We have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York, and we need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, it's not an exercise. It's not a test.
Finally, Flight 11 is spotted, approaching New York City. The controllers assume it's headed for JFK Airport, so they start clearing a runway to get it ready.
Then a breakthrough. A flight attendant from Flight 11, Amy Sweeney, manages to get on the radio. They ask her to look out the window and describe what she sees. Where exactly is the plane?
I see water. I see buildings. We're flying low. We're flying very, very low. Too low. Oh my God, we're too low. Oh my...
Flight 11 crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, right into the symbol of New York and the economic heart of America. At first, no one really understands what just happened. TV networks begin live coverage from the scene. Anchors speculate it might have been some kind of tragic accident. Meanwhile, President George W. Bush is on a scheduled visit to an elementary school in Florida.
He's told that a small propeller plane has hit one of the Twin Towers, and that's all the info they give him.
The president has no idea that it was actually a full-sized commercial airliner, not a small prop plane, so he continues with the visit as planned.
Back in New York, both towers begin evacuation procedures, but not for long. In the South Tower, the evacuation is canceled shortly after it begins. Since it didn't suffer major damage, people are told to go back upstairs and return to their desks.
But things in the North Tower are getting worse by the minute. Everyone trapped above the impact zone is completely cut off. The stairwells are destroyed, elevators out of service.
Desperate, people start calling 911, but the operators don't yet understand the full scale of the disaster, so they tell people to stay put and wait for help. But on those upper floors, there's nowhere to escape the flames and the thick smoke.
At US Air Traffic Control, chaos is building. Now, another plane goes silent. It's Flight 175. Its transponder is still on, so the controllers can see it clearly, and they notice something terrifying. The plane is veering way off course. Just minutes later, Flight 175, flying at 850 kilometers per hour, slams into the South Tower. Millions of people watch it live on television. Now there's no doubt, this is a coordinated terrorist attack. President Bush is still at the Florida school. That's when his chief of staff, Andrew Card, steps into the classroom and whispers the news. Another plane has hit the second tower. Bush tries to stay calm, not wanting to scare the children, but the weight of the moment is visible on his face. A few minutes later, he leaves the room. Around the same time, air traffic controllers lose contact with a third plane, Flight 77.
Airlines across the country immediately begin grounding their flights, but one air traffic controller, Ed Ballinger, decides to take it even further. He sends out a direct warning to the pilots already in the sky.
Beware of any cockpit intrusion. 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center.
But the message isn't clear. Not everyone understands it the first time. The pilot of Flight 93, Jason Dahl, asks for it to be repeated. Just 4 minutes later, his plane sends out a distress signal.
Air traffic controllers hear strange noises and voices coming from the cockpit. Then a man with an Arabic accent says he has a bomb.
Passengers on board Flight 93 begin calling their loved ones on their cell phones to say goodbye. It's through these heartbreaking calls that they learn the truth. A terrorist attack is unfolding.
At exactly 9:37 a.m., the third plane, Flight 77, crashes into the Pentagon, right into the U.S. Department of Defense headquarters. In response, all commercial flights are immediately grounded. Planes are ordered to land at the nearest airports. Meanwhile, the military receives the order. If any aircraft moves uncontrollably towards key government sites, they are to shoot it down. At the Twin Towers, rescue operations are now in full swing. Most people below the impact zones are successfully evacuated, but those trapped on upper floors, they can't be reached. Helicopters can't land on the rooftops because of the intense fires. And then, the South Tower collapses. Debris and a massive cloud of dust engulf everything and everyone below.
Now everyone is looking for the final hijacked plane, Flight 93. There's word it's heading for Washington, maybe the Capitol or even the White House. But it never makes it there.
Instead, it crashes in the middle of a field in Pennsylvania. Just 25 minutes later, the second tower in New York comes crashing down.
By 12:15 p.m., the last commercial flight has left U.S. airspace. Fighter jets are now patrolling the skies across the entire country. Dust and smoke slowly begin to clear, and rescue teams try to go back in, hoping to find more survivors.
New York City's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, holds a press conference. A reporter asks him how many lives were lost. The mayor replies, "More than any of us can bear." TV anchors everywhere are discussing the attack. Everyone wants to know, who did this and why? No terrorist group claims responsibility. Not yet.
At first, suspicions fall on the Palestine Liberation Organization and Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq, but there's no solid proof.
Eventually, intelligence agencies become certain it was al-Qaeda and their leader, Osama bin Laden. He had already declared war on the United States back in 1996, but back then no one really took him seriously.
That same evening, President Bush wrote in his diary, "The Pearl Harbor of the 21st century took place today. We believe it was Osama bin Laden."
After the September 11 attacks, Osama bin Laden becomes the most infamous terrorist in the world. He is one of 54 children of the businessman Mohammed bin Laden. Osama was born in 1957 in Saudi Arabia. His father was a billionaire and owned the country's largest construction company. Because of this, Osama attended the best schools and lived a very privileged life. In 1971, he took an English language course at Oxford, where he got exposed to Western culture.
By the late 1970s, though, Osama's life and that of many Muslims was about to change drastically. In Afghanistan, communists came into power. They fight amongst themselves and split the country into two factions.
One faction calls for help from the USSR. In 1979, Soviet troops enter Afghanistan. Muslims see this as an invasion by non-believers. Volunteers from across Islamic countries go to fight the Soviets. Amid all this, Osama bin Laden drops out of school and flies to Pakistan.
From there, he helps the Mujahideen, Afghan guerrilla fighters battling the Soviets. The Mujahideen are also funded by the United States, which doesn't want the Soviet Union to gain a foothold in the region. But at this stage, bin Laden and the Americans haven't crossed paths yet.
Eventually, the Soviet Union gets stuck in Afghanistan, facing fighters who are extremely motivated. These fighters support Islamic fundamentalism. This ideology wants to bring back strict Islamic laws, from banning any kind of entertainment to limiting women's rights. In short, these fighters are fanatics for whom Islam is the most important thing in life. Bin Laden also becomes drawn to Islamic fundamentalism, and by 1984, he's not just funding the Mujahideen, he's fighting alongside them against the communists.
By this time, Osama's father has passed away, so he inherits part of the family business. Bin Laden now has a lot of money, and he uses it to build tunnels in Afghanistan's caves that turn into military bases.
So, Osama forms Arab volunteer units, but they fight poorly and the locals just laugh at them. Still, with his money, he can do whatever he wants.
By 1988, these volunteers come together to form al-Qaeda. In Arabic, that means the base, the foundation. They plan a jihad, a holy war against non-believers, namely the Soviet Union.
Just a year later, the USSR withdraws its troops from Afghanistan. This sparks a civil war.
Bin Laden doesn't want to fight against fellow Muslims, so he returns to Saudi Arabia, where he's welcomed as a national hero.
Osama is working hard on his own PR and on expanding al-Qaeda. Training camps start popping off in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Sudan for new recruits. Bin Laden is offering poor Muslim youths a chance to fight for the values of Islam, and many take him up on it.
Plus, by local standards, he's paying well, anywhere from $100 to $1,000 a month. Al-Qaeda fighters even get paid leave, insurance, and free tickets home. And by 1990, a new mission is on the horizon.
Iraq's president, Saddam Hussein, decides to seize neighboring Kuwait, which is loaded with oil and has access to the Persian Gulf. He takes it in just 2 days. The king of nearby Saudi Arabia is worried that Iraq might attack him next, so he calls the United States for help.
Osama bin Laden doesn't want Christians, especially Americans, fighting on sacred Muslim land. He tells the king that al-Qaeda will defend Saudi Arabia if needed, but the king isn't convinced.
So, US President George H.W. Bush forms a coalition of 35 countries. 500,000 troops, mostly Americans, arrive in Saudi Arabia to set up military bases. Operation Desert Storm kicks off. In just 42 days, the Iraqi army is crushed and forced out of Kuwait. But the Americans don't leave. They stay until Iraq meets all of the conditions of the peace treaty, and that just makes bin Laden even angrier.
He doesn't hold back and openly criticizes the king, attacking him and even his family. He pushes it so far that even bin Laden's own relatives beg him to calm down. But he doesn't listen, and he irritates the king so much that he's expelled from the country.
In 1991, bin Laden moves to Sudan, where Islamists have just come to power. There he dives into businesses and starts giving money to the Sudanese authorities in exchange for their protection.
It's here that bin Laden makes a final decision. He's going to fight America. Al-Qaeda launches a propaganda campaign against the US. Muslims have long distrusted Americans because of their support for Israel, their main enemy.
And now, with American military bases even near the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, that resentment skyrockets. Bin Laden also loudly claims that all Muslim problems are caused by Americans, and many people believe him. Soon, Osama starts meddling in other nations' politics. Al-Qaeda fighters show up in Somalia and Yemen, both in the midst of civil wars.
These countries have a lot of Americans, and bin Laden organizes attacks against them. But more often than not, his attacks fail. Bombs don't go off, or when they do, they explode where no Americans are present. Tragically, only civilians end up dying. This is how Osama evolves into a full-fledged terrorist.
Saudi Arabia strips him of his citizenship, and even his own family takes away his business and turn their backs. Now Osama is no longer a millionaire. On top of that, the king pressures Sudan to kick him out as well. So he heads back to Afghanistan, fully dependent on the Taliban regime and their leader, Mullah Omar. The Taliban are radical Islamists who took power after the Civil War. They turned Afghanistan into one of the most closed-off countries in the world.
Women aren't allowed to work or go to school, and even the smallest violations of religious or secular law are punishable by death. Television, photos, even those are banned. Afghanistan becomes the perfect playground for terrorists. Osama and Mullah Omar hit it off, and Osama settles in nicely.
In 1996, Osama bin Laden publicly declares war on the United States. He even issues a fatwa, a religious ruling, to back it up.
He accuses the US of occupying holy lands and supporting Israel, which, with American money, he claims, is killing Muslims. After this declaration, Osama bin Laden skyrockets in popularity.
Journalists start coming to see him. He gives interviews talking about his great war against America. In reality, Al-Qaeda was still weak at the time and couldn't fight a professional army.
To boost its reputation, bin Laden claims attacks for Al-Qaeda that it didn't even organize. A US helicopter shot down in Somalia? Yeah, that was us. An explosion at an American military base? That's us too. And even with no proof, it still builds bin Laden and Al-Qaeda's image as America's top enemy.
Osama quickly becomes a symbol for the anti-American movement. He gains new supporters, sponsors, and volunteers. Al-Qaeda starts to grow.
But America doesn't take bin Laden's threats seriously, at all. To them, he's just a poor, failed terrorist. So what? He's sitting somewhere up in the mountains of Afghanistan talking nonsense. What harm could he possibly do? Osama bin Laden is making a loud, bold statement about himself. And here's the big question. How did he actually pull it off?
Let's start with the fact that Osama wasn't working alone. Meet Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, an Islamic terrorist who in the early 90s is operating separately from al-Qaeda. Khalid has a nephew, Ramzi Youssef, and both of them are plotting new terrorist acts.
In 1993, Ramzi parks a bomb-laden car in the underground garage of one of the Twin Towers.
The plan? Blow up one tower so it collapses into the other. But the bomb isn't powerful enough. The tower stands, though the attack still kills 6 people and injures another 1,000. But uncle and nephew aren't ready to quit. In 1995, they plan to assassinate the Pope during his visit to the Philippines. But bad planning ruins their attempt again.
Next comes a third plan: hijack and blow up 12 passenger planes all at once. But the plot is uncovered. The nephew is arrested, but authorities can't prove the uncle's involvement. So, Khalid goes underground. He hides in several countries until he ends up in Afghanistan. Once he's there, Khalid meets Osama bin Laden and shares the ideas he had with his nephew. The two terrorists hit it off. Khalid joins al-Qaeda, and now they start plotting large-scale attacks against the United States.
Around the same time, Osama is heavily influenced by the Egyptian radical Ayman al-Zawahiri. He convinces Osama that small, isolated attacks won't make an impact. They need something massive.
Ayman al-Zawahiri wants to bring the attacks to American soil. He even has an idea for how to do it: suicide bombers. But there's a problem. Islamic teachings forbid suicide. So Ayman presents it differently. He frames the attacks as a death in the name of Islam, a shaheed, a martyr for the faith. And martyrs, he say, are guaranteed a place in paradise.
Soon, al-Qaeda moves from words to action. In 1998, 2 trucks packed with explosives go off simultaneously outside the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. It's the first coordinated terrorist attack of its kind. Over 200 people die, and another 4,000 are injured. Among the victims are U.S. citizens.
The Americans start realizing that al-Qaeda is a serious threat. They demand the Taliban hand over the terrorists, but the Taliban refuse. So, the US fires missiles at al-Qaeda training camps in Afghanistan. It doesn't really slow them down, and a full-scale US war isn't ready to happen. Americans were used to fighting conventional armies, but bin Laden is building something they've never faced before.
Al-Qaeda has money and a network that spans the globe. Its members operate alone. They're well-trained and ready to die, because after that, paradise awaits. Terrorists blend in with ordinary people, spending years preparing a single attack. Everything in al-Qaeda is meticulously planned. They know how to hide from intelligence agencies, and the most important part, they can't be wiped out with just one strike.
The FBI didn't even set up its first counterterrorism unit until 1999. Around the same time, Osama bin Laden is put on the International Wanted List. He's one of the top 10 most dangerous terrorists in the world. But in the US, only intelligence agencies really know about him. The average American? They've never heard of him, even though Osama is constantly plotting attacks.
For example, in October 2000, al-Qaeda hits the USS Cole, an American warship patrolling the waters near Iraq. The terrorists approach the ship in a small boat packed with explosives.
The American sailors don't suspect a thing. Fishermen often float around those waters, and the people on the boat even wave at the military. But then suddenly, they speed up, slam into the side of the ship, and explode.
The blast tears apart a hole in the Cole's hull big enough to fit a bus. 17 American sailors are killed.
But these attacks, they're really just a distraction. Because by this time, al-Qaeda's leaders are already planning a massive strike on America's most iconic symbols:
the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and the White House. Later, they swap the White House for the Capitol. Easier to hit, less protected. This attack combines Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's idea of hijacking planes, Ayman al-Zawahiri's concept of suicide pilots, and Osama bin Laden's burning desire to destroy the United States.
Osama is deeply committed to the plan, believing he already defeated the USSR in Afghanistan so thoroughly, in fact, that it collapsed. America is next. Osama is convinced that after this attack, chaos will erupt in the US too, and the country will break apart into separate states.
The pilots were the heart of bin Laden's operation. Without them, nothing would work. Al-Qaeda had plenty of volunteers willing to become shaheeds, but not everyone was cut out for the job.
A suicide pilot needed to be educated, speak English, and have lived in the West for a period of time. Al-Qaeda found 3 men who fit the bill.
Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Shaheh, and Zaid Shekhe, immigrants from Arab countries living and working in Germany. Later, Khani Khanjour joins the group. He's a licensed pilot.
In short, these 4 are the main candidates. But just in case, Al-Qaeda prepares backups. They arrive in the US individually. They don't hide their names or bank accounts. Everything is clean legally, and they all apply to American flight schools. Normally, that might raise some red flags, but it didn't, because of one little detail.
To become a pilot in Saudi Arabia, you need certification from the US Federal Aviation Administration. So many Arabs came to America specifically to train as pilots.
Still, the intelligence agencies were on edge. They knew bin Laden was planning some massive attack. In 2000, Al-Qaeda had a meeting in Malaysia. Local intelligence caught wind of it and passed the info along to the Americans.
Some of the future hijackers even attended this meeting. The Americans even got their photos, but they were still allowed into the US so the agencies could track them later.
There's a lot of information out there about the preparation for the attacks, but still, it happened. And that sparked a ton of conspiracy theories, that the Americans somehow let the terrorists hit the towers, that the US president was in it with bin Laden, and so on. But the truth is actually much simpler. Before 9/11, US intelligence agencies barely shared any information with each other.
The CIA was gathering intel overseas, the FBI was handling things inside the country, but all that data wasn't coming together, and the big picture often went unseen.
Back in 2001, nobody could even imagine terrorists hijacking 4 planes at the same time and crashing them into the country's most iconic buildings. Nobody even had a plan for something like that.
Sure, terrorists had hijacked planes before, but usually they'd land them somewhere and make demands. Those situations typically ended with a flight crew rescue or the plane being stormed. Al-Qaeda's plan, though, was so complex and unexpected that most people simply didn't believe it could happen.
By August 6, 2001, the CIA puts a folder on the US president's desk titled, "Bin Laden wants to strike the US." Everyone knows something is brewing, but where and how? Nobody knows. The last real chance to uncover the terrorists' plan came in August 2001, when a flight school in Minnesota reports a suspicious student to the FBI, Zacarias Moussaoui.
He's asking a lot of strange questions, things like whether cockpit doors lock and other odd details. On August 16th, Moussaoui is arrested, but not for plotting an attack, just for an expired visa.
There's no evidence that he's planning anything, and honestly, nobody seems to be trying very hard. No extra questioning, no laptop search, nothing.
And then September 11th arrives. There are 19 terrorists involved in the operation, 15 from Saudi Arabia, 2 from the United Arab Emirates, 1 from Lebanon, and 1 from Egypt. The youngest is 20, the oldest 33.
They're split into 4 groups. Each group has a pilot trained in American flight schools tasked with flying the hijacked planes. These groups calmly arrive at the airports and board their flights.
2 planes take off from Boston, 1 from Washington, and 1 from Newark, all heading across the country to California. The planes are fully fueled on purpose. The more fuel on board, the bigger the impact. The terrorists board the planes because airport security checks are mostly superficial and selective. A few of them get stopped, asked some questions, go through metal detectors, but then they're allowed on board.
Their luggage contains nothing illegal, just small box cutters which were allowed on planes at the time, and pepper spray. Any bombs meant to scare passengers were most likely fake.
Finally, the planes take off. The first one to lift off is Flight 11. On board is the leader of the whole operation, Mohammed Atta. Together with the other terrorists, he hijacks the plane and immediately makes a mistake.
Atta accidentally presses the wrong button, sending a hijack message not to the passengers, but to the Boston air traffic controller. But because of slow response, it didn't lead to anything.
The attack goes according to plan. The first 2 planes crash into the Twin Towers. At 8:46, Atta flies into the North Tower, hitting between floors 93 and 99. The explosion destroys all the stairwells and traps people above. 17 minutes later, the second plane hits the South Tower between floors 77 and 85.
Some stairwells remain intact, allowing part of the people to escape, but the situation is made worse by jet fuel, which spreads through elevator shafts and mechanical systems. It ignites, and the fire devours the towers from the inside.
Meanwhile, the third plane, flown by former professional pilot Hani Khanjour, crashes into the western wing of the Pentagon at low altitude.
The wing is under renovation, so fewer people are inside than usual. Still, 125 people in the building and 64 on the plane lose their lives.
Urgent evacuations begin at the White House and the Capitol. Everyone now realizes this is a coordinated terrorist attack. Military jets take to the sky. One of the first to intercept is Lieutenant Heather Penny. Her mission? Track down the last missing airliner. 2 F-16s are scouring the skies at low altitude.
The military is ordered to shoot the plane down, but they don't even have missiles. The National Guard and other internal forces are up, but their jets aren't armed either. Getting missiles ready would take time that they just simply didn't have. So, they come up with a different plan.
Everyone saw the plane slam into the World Trade Center towers. We couldn't help the passengers, but we could prevent even more deaths. We agreed. The commander would ram the cockpit, and I would go for the tail. About 2 weeks later, my mom realized the pilot of Flight 93 could have been my father. He worked for United Airlines and usually flew routes on the East Coast.
But on the day of the attacks, the captain of Flight 93 was actually Heather's father's close friend, not her dad. Imagine how terrifying it would have been if Heather had to ram a plane with her own father on board. At that moment, Heather didn't even know that a fourth plane had already crashed just half an hour before she took off.
The passengers on Flight 93 didn't let the terrorists reach the Capitol. They learned about the earlier attacks from family on the phone and decided to act.
They vote to storm the cockpit and try and take back the plane. They wait until the plane is flying over empty land. Meanwhile, the flight attendants are boiling water ready to throw it on the hijackers.
The uprising is led by Todd Beamer. Before storming the cockpit, he says, "You ready? Okay, let's roll." The phrase "let's roll" would become a rallying cry for the entire war on terror.
The passengers try to break into the cockpit. On the black box recordings, you can hear the sounds of the struggle. The hijackers fight back, shaking the plane to knock people off their feet.
But when they realize the passengers are almost inside the cockpit, they crash the plane into the ground. They were just 20 minutes from Washington. No one survived.
Meanwhile, both twin towers have been burning for hours. Rescue teams are on the scene.
They realize they can't put out the fire quickly, so first they evacuate people.
Firefighters climb the towers on foot, carrying about 30 kilograms of gear each. Some can't even keep up and fall behind. Communication is poor, radios are blocked by the steel frame and reinforced concrete.
At 9:30 a.m., the first firefighter dies. Daniel Zur, a person jumping from the South Tower, falls on him. Half an hour later, the same tower collapses, taking everyone inside, including firefighters.
Firefighters in the North Tower are ordered to evacuate, but they don't rush. Some stop to help the injured. Others search for their colleagues lost in the stairwells. By 10:28 a.m., the North Tower falls too.
At the start of the attack, there were 17,500 people in the Twin Towers. Most managed to get out, but 2,606 don't make it. On the planes, no one survives. 265 passengers and crew perish. At the Pentagon, another 125 people die. The attacks claimed the lives of 343 firefighters, 72 police officers, 55 military personnel, and 19 terrorists.
These were people from 90 countries, with different nationalities and faiths. The 9/11 attacks became a tragedy not only for Americans, but for the entire world.
September 12th. The streets around the World Trade Center lie in total ruin. Not only did the Twin Towers collapse, but nearby, Tower 7 comes down too. Hundreds of thousands of tons of metal, concrete, and furniture crash down, crushing everything inside. Even today, many families haven't been able to bury their loved ones. 1,103 bodies remain unidentified.
The 9/11 attacks completely change airport security. Now, before every flight, everyone gets screened. No sharp objects allowed, liquids are limited, and cockpit doors are now armed and always locked.
Banks start monitoring all suspicious transfers. Al-Qaeda spent around $500,000 preparing the attacks, and the banks hadn't tracked where the money came from. On top of all that, the US passes the Patriot Act, giving intelligence agencies the power to monitor both citizens and foreigners without needing a court order. This goes on until 2015.
After 9/11, everyday Americans feel intense anger towards Muslims. Attacks increase, sometimes even turning deadly. Even Indian Americans get caught in the crossfire.
Because of their turbans, they're often mistaken for Muslims and attacked. Just 3 days after the attacks, 20 relatives of Osama bin Laden, who had distanced themselves from him, are urgently flown out of the US.
Most Americans don't understand this. They want someone to be punished. While they grieve, it appears to them that the Arabs are celebrating.
In the streets of Palestine and Lebanon, crowds of people cheer. US TV shows footage of the celebrations, which only fuels American anger. George W. Bush declares a war on terror. His approval ratings soar. People are ready for revenge.
For the first time in history, NATO invokes Article 5. That means an attack on one member is considered an attack on all members.
Their first target, Afghanistan, where Osama bin Laden is hiding. On October 7, 2001, the US and its allies launch Operation Enduring Freedom. Hundreds of bombers hit Taliban and al-Qaeda military sites. Then ground troopers move in. Within a few months, American forces crush the main Taliban units. The Taliban flee into mountains and across the borders into Pakistan.
A pro-Western government takes over Afghanistan, while the Taliban start a long-running guerrilla war. But the Americans' main target, Osama bin Laden, disappears. So, the US changes tactics.
They send advisors to countries where al-Qaeda operates. These advisors train local forces to fight terrorists. And now, al-Qaeda has nowhere left to hide.
Around the same time, the FBI remembers Zacarias Moussaoui, who was arrested back in August. During questioning, he admits he's part of al-Qaeda and trained as a pilot for an attack.
At first, it's believed Moussaoui was supposed to be the 20th hijacker. Each group would have had 5 people. But in the end, the Flight 93 terrorists were operating in a group of 4, and that's the plane that never reached its target. Later, the 20th hijacker is identified as another man, Ramzi bin al-Shib, who simply couldn't get a US visa. He's arrested in 2002, but in 2023 he's declared legally insane. Years of torture had taken a severe toll on his mental state.
All of this happens because the US set up a special prison for terrorists, the Guantanamo Bay military base. It's a small piece of land that America leases from Cuba.
This location was chosen on purpose. US laws don't fully apply here, so terrorists can be held without trial or formal charges. Guantanamo operates under a strict regime. People are interrogated and tortured for months. The first prisoners are al-Qaeda operatives and Taliban fighters. In 2003, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, one of the masterminds behind the 9/11 attacks, is sent there. His case is still in court today because not all evidence has been collected.
A few years after the attacks, President Bush names Iran, Iraq, and North Korea the axis of evil. He claims these countries are developing weapons of mass destruction, supporting terrorism, and threatening the entire planet. And he says the US will no longer wait to be attacked. They're ready to strike first.
This is how Bush introduces the new doctrine of preventative war. Its first target, Iraq, still ruled by dictator Saddam Hussein.
The Americans claim he helped al-Qaeda organize the 9/11 attacks, but there's no direct proof.
In February 2003, U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell addresses the UN. He holds up a vial with a white substance, saying it's evidence that Iraq is developing chemical and biological weapons. In March, the U.S. military invades Iraq. Within 3 weeks, they capture the capital, Baghdad. Many civilians die from the American bombings. In December of the same year, the Americans find Saddam and hand him over to an Iraqi tribunal. The dictator is charged with suppressing uprisings and killing civilians. In 2006, he's executed.
But what the US went to war over in the first place? They never find it. There's no chemical or biological weapons in Iraq. There's no proof that Hussein helped al-Qaeda. Colin Powell later admits that his UN speech was based on unverified information.
So even though Saddam Hussein was a brutal dictator, Americans still criticize Bush today for launching that attack.
Soon, theories start popping up that Iraq was really about oil. But 6 years later, the oil was mostly being pumped by European countries and China. Today, Iraq handles its own oil. The US officially leaves the country in 2011.
As for bin Laden, he keeps getting lucky. He hides out in Pakistan and even releases statements continuing to criticize the US. The Americans finally track him down in 2011 and take him out on the spot. The entire operation is watched live by the US sitting president at the time, Barack Obama.
Bin Laden's body is taken to the US for identification and then buried at sea to prevent any shrine from forming at his grave. Operation Enduring Freedom wraps up on December 28, 2014.
Troops are gradually withdrawn. Over the course of the war, 3,500 military personnel die, including 2,300 Americans. Almost 400,000 civilians lose their lives, people from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. And when it comes to money, just the operation in Afghanistan cost over $2 trillion. But it was a serious blow to al-Qaeda. Its leaders are taken out and the group is weakened. And not too long ago, on July 1st, 2022, a drone strike takes out Ayman al-Zawahiri, who led al-Qaeda after bin Laden's death. But completely eradicating terrorism, that still hasn't happened.
By August 31st, 2021, the United States had fully withdrawn its military from Afghanistan. The Taliban, who'd been fighting against them for 20 years, immediately attacked the country's pro-Western government. They crushed the Afghan army, the very force the US had spent years training and funding.
Today, the Taliban are back in power, just like at the end of the 90s. Al-Qaeda has a new leader. The organization is resurging and feels safe here. And while Al-Qaeda originally operated in only 3 countries, today it's active in 20. The axis of evil, as George Bush once called it, hasn't gone anywhere. In fact, it's growing. Terrorist groups are even creating their own states, like ISIS in Syria.
In addition, the Insider and Spiegel reveal that Russia had ties with the Taliban going back to 2010. They report that Moscow funded attacks on American troops in Afghanistan. While Russia denies it, the US has largely turned a blind eye.
Today, Taliban members freely travel to Russia and openly meet with Russian politicians, as if they're not considered terrorists at all.
Meanwhile, groups like ISIS, which broke off from al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and many smaller terrorist organizations are still active.
The 9/11 attacks were undoubtedly one of the worst terrorist attacks to ever occur on American soil. And while the aftermath was rife with conflict and divisiveness, the American people came together in a way that had not been seen before in a long time. And we will never forget the many lives lost and the many sacrifices of our great service members, firefighters, police officers, and civilians alike who died trying to save those that were affected by the attack.
Thank you so much for watching. This was a very difficult video to do, but I believe it is a very important moment to cover. Again, I wanted to take a second and thank the service members and their families, and remember their sacrifice during this tragedy. Please feel free to drop us a comment. We want to know what you think. And hey, if you feel like it, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories. We sincerely appreciate all the support. And yes, this was yesterday. We'll see you in the next one.